really excited about what you're doing at Shadowbox because one, it's a big challenge and goal that you're going after, but I think it's something that I think anyone who's dealt with or been in the health system before knows is a problem, is sort of the disconnect of information across the world or across the systems. And specifically, like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, with electronic health records, EHRs, is everyone has different systems. Some people use fax machines and pagers and emails and electronic records here, and it's all over the place. And all the systems within the health system, which keep everything running effectively, don't speak to each other well. And that creates lag in the system, that creates unforeseen costs, and really just a poor system for everyone, for the patients, for the doctors, for the nurses, really for everyone who participates in it. And that's why I said you're very brave to take on such a big problem. But I think the interesting thing is anyone who's been to the doctor, everyone's been to the hospital, has dealt with these issues of missing information or incorrect taking of information, and one system's not speaking to another. So for everyone listening, Greg is going to solve that problem with Shadowbox. You are playing the middleman between all these systems, really creating like a very easy integration between all the information to make sure they play nice and make sure the healthcare runs smoothly.
It's true. And this is a really personal and I'm very passionate about trying to solve this problem. Even though I started Shadowbox because I was an executive at a large diagnostic lab that was dealing with the operational and business challenges related to disconnected information. And I saw and found that we needed to sort of rethink how we do interoperability in healthcare. It really hit home to me not too long ago, just actually in October of 23, I'm into martial arts, and even at my age, and I managed to injure my lower back prepping for a tournament. And I was in just massive pain, barely move. And so I went to my sports doc. He said, hey, let's just do an x-ray and see what we can find out. Turns out the in-office x-ray that they did was inconclusive. He said, I think that what we really need to do, given the amount of pain you're in, is to send you to an imaging center to get an MRI. And let's really dig in and find out what's happening. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. He's like, okay. So he sent off an e-fax to the imaging center to get me scheduled. And he told me, hey, it takes a couple of weeks for the insurance company to approve these, what's called a prior authorization, to enable to have them actually cover the cost minus my massive deductible or copay to get that going. So when you get that invite back to schedule, give it at least 2 weeks. And it turned out I was doing some traveling, and so the earliest I was able to schedule was actually 19 days out. And mind you, traveling in pain, he had given me some oral steroids, which sort of really helped with that, taking a pain level of like 9 or 10 down to 5 or 6, but it's constant. And I'm walking around a giant conference. Actually, it was a radiology conference. And I'm walking around this conference in my poorly chosen wingtip shoes and suit, and 2 days before my appointment was supposed to happen, I get a text or an email from the imaging center saying, hey, we need to reschedule because the prior auth didn't come through. Okay, well, I'm a fairly educated person. English is a first language. I work in healthcare. I'm a huge advocate for myself. I start making phone calls. So I call the imaging center and say, what happened? They said, oh, well, the fax that came over didn't have all the information we needed. So when we sent it off to the insurance company, they denied the authorization. So we had to go back to your sports doc and get more information. I'm like, okay, well, I can help with that. So I call up the sports doc's office and they said, hey, yeah, we got that, but we sent over that information via fax a couple days ago. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's just left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. So I call the insurance company. Insurance company's like, well, we actually have a third party that does these prior authorization reviews, so I can't actually see your specific case. And mind you, every single person that I talked to, they were genuine, they were lovely, they were empathetic. They recognized that I was in pain, and they recognized that real treatment couldn't happen until this MRI actually diagnosed what was the problem. But despite all of this, I was unable to get that process to move forward faster. And the entire reason that I was not getting the treatment I needed was because the order coming in the front door was incomplete, and that triggered everything. And here's the things, like I told you all of the things that are like about me, like, hey, educated, English, work in healthcare. imagine how often this happens every single day for somebody who, instead of a sports injury, it's work comp and they can't go to work. And they're not in the financial situation that I'm fortunate enough to be in where they miss 2 weeks of work and they could lose their home, right? Or imagine English is not their first language and they are advocates for themselves. Or imagine they're elderly and they don't know how to advocate. Like, this happens all the time. And it is a massive, massive problem. And the way that the industry, broadly speaking, has gone about it is completely broken. The fact that they're sending faxes in 2025 when we're recording this podcast is absurd.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 docs still order an ancillary service with a fax machine. And so we know the system's broken. You mentioned I worked in government as my first job. And it's true. And the reason I went to Washington and worked for congressmen was because I saw things that I thought were systemic and needed to be changed. And I thought, well, if I'm at the belly of the beast, so to speak, we can write laws that can change things, that can really improve things. But what we did, we can spend time talking about the legislation I worked on. But fast forward to 2016, and President Obama signs into law what's called the 21st Century Cures Act, which requires electronic health vendors to open up their systems to enable the efficient and effective access of that patient data for the provision of healthcare services. 2016, we're now, many years later, and the problem still exists. So yes, that's a very long-winded response to your prompt, but this is what we do every single day, and we are making a big impact. Today, we're like a typhoon in a teapot, if you will, today in terms of supporting primarily diagnostic labs, because that's the background that I have and the area I know. But we've moved into imaging. We have customers that are outside of that, and ultimately, we are creating a completely different way of thinking about interoperability. And I'm excited to share more about it. But that's what we do.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's always good to have a founder who's tied to a personal story instead of just someone who thinks there's dollars at the end of the rainbow and they're just going to go after it. But the first thing that when you were telling that story that came to mind to me is like, you are one person who's advocating for themselves and has discomfort and pain, but not life-threatening or not personal life-threatening as well. And you think about the hundreds of thousands of claims that go through every single day. You know better than me what percentage of those bounce back and don't go through or whatever it may be. Like, it's a huge number. It's directly affecting everybody's lives. So if you can make that process better by 1%, you're helping hundreds of thousands of people get what they need. And it's a long journey, and I'm sure we'll get into that of like what the vision is for the company and how long this journey is going to take, because this isn't a quick win. Nor is this like you're just going to go exit it in 4 years. Like, this is something that's going to take a long time to get the traction that you need and get the change that you need as well.
Yeah, I was listening recently to an Andreessen Horowitz podcast, and they had Mark Cuban as their guest, and it was really interesting. It was about GoodRx and how he's trying to disrupt the pharmaceutical space and take out the middlemen and reduce cost and provide better access to medications that are necessary. And at the end of the podcast, there was a really great question, which was, so Mark, do you have to be a billionaire to disrupt healthcare? And his response was, yeah, you do. And I don't agree with that. I think that that companies like us, with good technology and a passion and a team that is dedicated to that cause and all rowing in the same direction, and we can talk about talent more, can make a huge difference. But the difference between a billionaire doing it and a Greg Stein venture funded doing it is, 900 and many millions of dollars that, in terms of being able to move the needle faster.
Yeah.
But I kudos to Mark and to the other entrepreneurs. And there are a lot of us out here which are really tackling healthcare in every which way, because quite frankly, it's still about 17, 18% of GDP we spend on healthcare, but our outcomes are not necessarily better than elsewhere. We've got 11,000 plus people turning 65 every day, and they need additional services. And whereas these amazing new technologies are coming to market and that are prolonging life, that are improving quality of life, that are addressing disease that otherwise would have been a death note. Like, these are amazing things that are coming to market. But there is so much waste and so much friction that has absolutely nothing to do with providing care, that we've got to collectively work together to try and be creative and to think differently about how things should operate so that we can actually provide these services and get better outcomes at a much lower cost.
Yeah, 100%. No, it's amazing what Mark's doing and putting his name out there and trying to create a more cost-effective pharmaceutical industry for Americans. And he's got an uphill battle, and he's got a lot of politicking to happen and a lot of advocating to make it happen. But yeah, you mentioned an interesting thing there where you're talking about, do you need to be a $1 billion company to disrupt the medical system? I think there's a shift in mindset that probably you have as well. You probably didn't verbalize it. Is like, you're not looking to disrupt the medical system. You're just trying to improve it. And I think that's where everyone's trying to go into that Silicon Valley mode of like, you have to destroy the medical system. You have to uproot it and you have to change it completely. That's not going to happen. But if you can make your segment of the medical system better, then you are going to have an exponential impact. And if multiple people, as you said, there's tons of people in your space. If everyone does that, or a handful of people do it, it's going to get better over time. Like, Mark Cuban is not going to perfect the over-the-counter drug industry, but if he can help a small percentage of the people, which tends to be a million people, get cheaper drugs, that has massive impact. So I think there's this, at least in tech, I find everyone wants to disrupt something. I don't think you need to disrupt anything. You just need to provide a better solution, and that you can have just as much impact. And I'm sure you have the same mindset because you're on this journey, and you're not going to take down the big behemoth and get every hospital, medical provider on the system right away. But if you can do your diagnostics first and then move into other industries and other cities and states or whatever it may be, then it's going to have massive ripple effect and impact.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's well stated. Here we are in early May of 2025, and we're observing the Silicon Valley effort to disrupt bureaucracy. And the motivations there, as a former staffer who dealt with bureaucracy, are on point. I can tell you many, many stories, and probably can't tell you many, many stories of trying to change bureaucracies, get them to move forward in a way that's effective. I'll give you one example.
Yeah, just tell the stories. Just don't name names, and you're good.
So we were able to we worked with the American Lung Association and other stakeholders to pass a law for commuters coming from Mexico into San Diego. So I live in San Diego. If you read the news, you know that our beaches are fouled with sewage coming north from the border many, many times a year. In fact, I think the stat I read is that Coronado, which is the beach that is, Imperial Beach, Coronado, right at the border, was closed something like 250 days in 2024. But we were working on cross-border air pollution because the congressman I worked for had served on the Air Pollution Control District for the County of San Diego and had an innovative approach to working with businesses to achieve air quality objectives. And so, but one of the challenges that we had is that there were thousands and thousands of people who crossed the border every day who were driving cars that were not registered in the U.S. and therefore were not smogged in California, not registered in California, not smogged in California. And therefore, we weren't meeting all of our objectives. And we thought, well, if you're a tourist, okay. But if you're living in Tijuana and coming to work in San Diego, and you're driving there every single day, you probably ought to register your car or at least have it smogged. So we passed a law that said for those commuters who are commuting more than 25 days a month, I don't remember the exact specifics of it, you needed to get a smog check. So the law was passed. It was part of a larger bill, ultimately, I think. And I called up the customs integration, it was at the time called customs leader in San Diego. By that time, I was the district chief of staff for that congressman. We covered this area. And I said, where are you at in implementing the law? And he's like, what law?
Yeah. I had a feeling where the story was going.
Yeah. And this is a very small, like obviously it's impactful for the hundreds of commuters or whatever, thousands of commuters, but it's a very small microcosm of what happens across the board. And that is laws get passed, but the rules don't get written, or the rules get written, but they don't actually encompass the intent of Congress, or they get written and they become stale and they need to be rewritten. Like, these are things, and the bureaucracy is not set up. There is no innovation, no incentive to be innovative, no incentive to change, no incentive to provide better at that level, right? And so there's just a frustration from policymakers when it comes to implementation of change at a pace that is so glacial. And so that's why, like, I get the motivation about what's happening in Washington, and the end outcome of trying to provide better government services is important. But as a former, like, as a person who likes continuity, or let me rephrase that, at least predictability, I know that it's challenging for all of my colleagues that are still in Washington or in those bureaucracies in the middle of all that. I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm just trying to state that it simply is. Sure. There's a way to go about change.
The way that I interpret it is you're actually making a business statement, and that's the smog's a perfect example of, like, someone has to come up with the strategy. Someone has to move it up the chain of commands, get it approved by your manager, then your VP, then the CEO, and then they have to sign off on it. Great. So that's step one, come up with the idea. Step two, get it approved. Then you have to implement it. So go out and teach people how to do it, or onboard people, or whatever it may be. And then you have to monitor it and make sure it's done and actually, like, enforce it. And if you don't do one of those four things in business, nothing will get done and nothing will change. And that's without the bureaucracy. Now try to do those four things in a very bureaucratic, red tape environment where you're relying on all these different parties. And to your point, none of them are incentivized to do what you're asking them to do. Good luck. Like, it's just never going to happen. And unless you put carrots at the end of the stick for everybody, like, people aren't going to chase after it and get things done, because there's no benefit to it. You can just continue down and operate in your own way. And that's why I started the podcast saying you're a very brave man to work in politics. So, but I think it is a study of humans and business, and it doesn't matter if it's within the government, within nonprofits, within for-profits, my company, my service business. Like, everyone's got to be on the same page, and everyone has to be incentivized the right way to get something done, or things aren't going to change. So now that's the sort of vision and visual of it. Now, to your point, how does that change for you? Like, what's your way to make that change in government, or what is that way to do it effectively in business from your side?
Well, I think ultimately it comes down to the people that you surround yourself with, both within on an operational scale, but also outside, an advisors board and so on. I think that one of the greatest opportunities or things about being a founder is that you get to sort of build that team yourself, and you get to think through how to put all those puzzle pieces together in a way that collectively works well. And we, from the very beginning, have had am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
All right, go for it. Let it fly.
We have a no asshole policy, and the reason for that, I'm sure, the dysfunctions of team, 6 dysfunctions of team, whatever they are, that book and so on. No matter how talented a person is, if they are incapable of collaborating in a way that elevates the entire organization, then ultimately at the end of the day, their talents cause more harm than good. Yeah. And so we really focus on that no asshole policy. But on the other thing that I did when I first started was I wrote up a list of our values as an organization. And because I think that without a clear set of values and guiding principles, that you end up, that really helps self-filter out the people that aren't aligned with those values.
Yeah.
But the other thing that once you've got that sort of core group of people and you're working in your line, you have to have a system in place that provides clear vision for the end game, but also the steps that need to be taken along the way, and then measure progress regularly against those steps. And so I think that when you talk about execution, there are hundreds of thousands, billions, I don't know, of great ideas out there. And I have met some really, really brilliant inventors, if you will. But if you're unable to execute on the invention, if you're unable to put that team together, if you're unable to match the business realities with the technical opportunities or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
then you'll fail.
Yeah.
And so that was the mindset I had starting out. And I could tell you, I probably made every mistake along the way. But hopefully, because of that mindset and those values, that we've been able to course correct and coach our team and get better outcomes at the end of the day.
Yeah, I like the just bluntness of it, of no assholes. I had something similar, and I actually in our business, like, we deal with it all the time, right? We're an offshore staffing firm. Like, we have people hiring all the time, and most of our talent's in South Africa, and whatever, we have hundreds of interviews a month. And recently I had a client of mine, he was a small tech company, I don't know, under 30 employees, and they're looking to bring on a graphic designer. And they're like, yeah, it's really important. This will be a second marketing hire. Like, we really want to make sure you find the right person, blah, blah, blah. And we had 300 plus applicants. They interviewed 6 finalists. They were down to 3. They're like, yeah, they all seem great. Like, we don't really know who we want to hire. And I didn't really go after the asshole side of it, but something I used in my previous company is very simple. It was like, if you had to pick one of them to go on a road trip with, who would it be?
Yeah.
And they had an answer immediately. They're like, oh, this person. And I'm like, perfect. You guys are a small company. Like, you need people that you want to work with, you like you would want to go on a road trip with them. And those are the personalities, especially I find in small environments, is like, you want to be side by side with people that you trust, people you like, and people that are going to have your back in the same mindset of you. And it's so important to sort of take that human approach early on. Like, I think a lot of business owners try to operate like Apple, where you're finding like specialists, and let's just find the best of the best and like make sure we have the people, like, this is the best Node.js backend developer. I'm like, small companies should not have that mindset. Small companies should have like, let's go find problem solvers. Let's go find people that have energy and people that I'm going to want to work with. When you work for big, like, one of my previous companies was acquired by Yelp. So I was a Yelp employee for 2 years. They don't give a shit about you. You're just a number. You're a nobody. Maybe your initial group, like your management group or your department group or whatever it may be, like, you're going to interact with them. But the VPs, the execs, the CEOs, like, they don't give a shit about you. You're just a number. You're one of 3,000 employees, and they're just making sure that they can incentivize you, if you're performing, to stay. But small companies really need to take that no asshole approach or that road trip approach and find people that fit the culture and your vibe, because you're going to be in the trenches together.
Yeah, I agree, and to the point where we've walked away from opportunities with now. So I told you that we have a team that I'd go on a road trip with any one of them. There's nothing in this 100% remote society that we have today. Our company is 100% remote. We have a core of people in San Diego, but we have employees around the country. So I don't get to see them much, but I was recently at a conference and had a chance to actually spend time with them, and that was great. But it's not just about as a small company, it's not just about the people that are on your team. I think it's also important to have that mindset with the people who are your customers or your vendors or your investors, because any one thing can be catastrophic, and you don't want to add into the mix the distraction and stress of having to prepare for every conversation with a customer or a vendor or whatever, where you're having to think through what eggshells you're going to be walking on in that conversation, because there's no trust in that, and trust is so vital at this stage. As a founder, you've got to be able to trust that a vendor is going to deliver what they can on time, on budget. Yeah. And if they can't, they've got a real reason why, and they're going to work with you. Or if you're a customer in tech, and you've got a brand new technology that is different than what's out there, and and you have downtime, like, they get it, right? So that mindset is important, not just for founders. I want to make sure I'm saying it clearly. The mindset of working with people on your own team and the road trip mentality is just as important for the people you're working with that are outside of your company.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think a lot of people overlook that. And it's interesting you say vendors. Like I think most people think employees, customer relationships is sort of like the move is like, let's find the right people and then let's get customers and build relationships with them. But I think it's interesting you said vendors, whether it's like a software provider or marketing agency you work with or whatever, because it's all part, like everyone's working towards the same goal if you find the right people. And I think the hard part is that you have to build genuine connections with everyone, and you have to be a genuine person, and you have to actually give a shit. And for us, like our business, a lot of our business, I'd say about 40% of our business is through our network and through referrals, where we provide great service to one client. They are out for dinner with their friends. They tell their friends about us and we get connected. And it's a great thing to have from a lead flow and business perspective, but it doesn't happen naturally. And a lot of the times we have to eat it because we have to, whatever, give them a discount, or you have to like go above and beyond. You have to work on the weekends to get something done on time quick for the client, or whatever. Maybe you have to jump on calls at midnight, but that goodwill goes a really long way. And I would advocate for any founder to sort of do those above and beyond things to build relationships with customers and vendors in certain cases. Because it'll come back in spades. And I think a lot of times, at least for me mentally, I don't know if you see this as well, but sometimes I have a hard time justifying the additional work or the money or whatever you have to spend to get that thing done up front, because I don't know a tangible return. I don't know if I, buy this software or get this gift for this client or whatever it may be, it's going to come back to me. I hope it will. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that emotional tie of like not knowing, and I'm a very like quantitative person. I'm like, I want to know if I spend $100, I'm going to get 1,000 back from it. That doesn't always work like that. But if you do it over and over and over and over and over again, it's bound to come back to you.
Yeah, I've always had a sort of that pay it forward mindset. And the other thing that I would say is that it also helps for the founder to be authentic themselves in how they're interacting and have that open, that mindset of, I want to build a personal relationship with everybody that comes across that I interact with. Obviously at 3,000 employees, that's not possible.
Yeah.
But as a founder, I do think it's really important. There's a book I always recommend called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. I think that's the right author and title, but it really talks about how when you have that mindset of give expecting nothing thereof, the world could be made a better place if we rethink our assumptions. The opportunities are out there. Like having that mindset, like waking up every morning, drinking a giant cup of coffee or whatever, going into the day with that kind of mindset creates dialogue that is often incredibly creative. And whereas if you don't have a growth mindset, and I saw this in the bigger companies, and some smaller companies too, but bigger companies, where it gets to the point where, hey, I don't want to hear an idea coming out of sales if I'm in engineering, because what does a salesperson know about engineering? And I don't want somebody, or you're in finance, what do you know about operations? And that was one of the most frustrating things for me, is to sit in a room and have somebody tell me, well, it's not your job to know how to do what we're doing. I'm like, we're ideating, right? Yeah. And we're trying to be creative. And when you build those silos, it's a perfect example of a not growth mindset that is really prevalent. So again, with our team, we are constantly, I don't know if you're familiar with the EOS management system, but we kind of follow that. Yeah. And so we have a leadership team, and we constantly bring issues every single week. We track our metrics every single week. And as a leadership team, we bring issues to discuss, and we purposefully are cross-functional in how we discuss those issues, because you never know whether or not it's going to be a marketing idea that solves an engineering problem or not. And I think that is something that is really valuable too in building an early stage company.
It's funny you mentioned the EOS system. I have where's the book? I literally just bought it. I started reading the book on the EOS system, which is called what's it called? Built to Scale or something like that. I forget what it's called.
I don't recall either because it came to us through we hired a VP of engineering and he's like, you're running your meetings pretty good, but what if you ran your meetings like this? I'm like, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
Let's do that.
it's
So
called
once again,
traction. Get a grip on your
yeah,
business.
traction. Yeah.
I literally just started it. It's beside, I guess I thought it was in my backpack, but I guess it's beside my bed. But I just started reading it. So funny you brought up the US system. I guess I have to hurry up my book. But
Yeah. Well, one of my heroes, startup heroes, is a guy named Michelle Kripalani. We both went to school at UC San Diego a long time ago. But he and several of my friends started a gaming company, the first photorealistic gaming company called the Journeyman Project, which really dates, if you're into gaming, really dates this conversation. But Michelle has started numerous companies, very successful, all in that sort of gaming space. And now he is an EOS coach. And so if you're in San Diego area, or even virtually, and you want to learn, get the support from their team directly, Michelle Kripalani, check them out.
Nice. Is that not to put you on the spot, but in terms of the EOS system, like if you had to break it down to like core principles, do you have what does that look like? Is there sort of pillars to the EOS system, and how do you guys use that from day to day? Because I've heard a lot about it. And it seems like it works for a lot of things. And for anyone who's listening, it's called the Entrepreneurial Operation System is what it stands for. And again, I'm early in the book, but I believe there's like 6 core pillars to the EOS system in terms of how you can manage your company. But do you know what those are, or are there sort of a couple of them that you pulled to put into your business?
Well, I can't quote them for you because again, it came to us sort of sideways, but it really, and I talked a little bit already. It's setting what's the vision, the 10-year goal, what's sort of the halfway point, what are you going to do in 2 years, what are you going to do every quarter, and how are you going to measure against those quarters? I think they call the quarterly objectives rocks. We call them KPIs, OKRs. There's always a different terminology for it, but you break down the vision into what is achievable on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, and you measure against it. And when I talk about bringing issues to resolve, they actually set up a sort of a structured executive meeting, which I think they call first team, and we call it first team too. So it's a structured executive meeting where you run through your KPIs really fast, just to see what's on track. If you're not on track, you got an issue to discuss, right? And then everybody ideates about how to solve that issue. And then there are things that are happening outside of that are issues discussed that also get put on that list. And then the CEO and team sort of manage or prioritize what's on that list because there's never enough time to get through everything and solve everything. But the idea is in that meeting, you solve or you come up with ideas of how to solve, and then you drop down to a list of tasks that can be accomplished in the next week. And those tasks to accomplish are in the next week. And then and then every week you say, did we accomplish this task or not? Why not? Yeah. And do we need to continue ideating on it? And then part of it too is, and I think this is in their group in there or not, but we do a meeting rating every meeting. Like, how do we do as a team? Yeah. Do we put the company objectives above our individual department's objectives, right? And are we speaking to each other in a way that's respectful? Are we open-minded, a growth mindset, all these things? Like, are we acting as first team? And then we judge it. And one of the things that happened maybe a year ago when we were looking at this, because we do a review obviously every quarter and every year, and we're like, we're too nice to ourselves. These meetings are not all 7s, 8s, and 9s. Like,
have you always done that rating strategy? Because I'm thinking back to my corporate office days, and I think every meeting would have been like a 2 out of 10 because the majority of the meetings, you would have these meetings, they would go on for an hour, you talk about a bunch of things. Usually depends what company you're in, like the executive team would fill the room with their voice and not listen to anyone else. And then you'd leave the room and everyone go get a coffee or go back to their desk, whatever, and everyone just talk shit behind each other's back. And like, what a toxic environment. Like, everyone has to go and speak their mind. But I think everyone in corporate environments wants to have their voices heard, and sometimes aren't as open as they perceive themselves to be. And it can be bad, but I like the idea of a public rating and feedback system if people listen and then implement and get better. But yeah, corporate meetings that are like the bane of my existence. So if you can make them better in any way, then I think everyone benefits from it.
Yeah, I know the founder of Bridgewater, and his name has escaped me at the moment. He advocates radical transparency, and they've got like a system, and the way he describes it, and the way it's been described, is that it's a powerful tool for blah blah blah, but it also can turn into a powerful tool for backstabbing and shit talking
Yeah.
and all the other
Well, I
things.
don't
So
know if you've ever read up or heard of Netflix's culture through Reed Hastings, but he believes in radical candor, and you hear all the stories in his book. What's the book called? Something like "There's No Rules" or something like that. It has a red cover. Maybe it's called the No Rules book or something like that by Reed Hastings, and it sounds so toxic. But he's like, that's who we are, and we own it. And for the people that appreciate that and want to do it, we're an amazing place to work, and we'll pay people the premiums for what they deserve. But if you don't have thick skin, you can't hang. Like, get out. And going back to your idea of like setting these pillars, is like that's one of their pillars. Is like, we're gonna have radical candor, and if you can hang, you can hang. If you can't hang, you can't hang. And there's a lot of stuff. So I think I highly recommend the book. It's an amazing book I read a few years ago, but I think you have to take it with a grain of salt. And a lot of the stuff like he talks about in there, one of the things that stuck with me is like he encourages all employees to take external interviews. He's like, if a recruiter reaches out, if a competitor reaches out, take the interview. They offer you something, we'll match it. We don't care. If you're worth it, like, we want to make sure you're getting paid fair market value. And I thought that was such a refreshing approach. Like, I've never heard a CEO or a founder say like, hey, go take job offers. Like, we don't care. And if we're the best company for you, and you're the best person for the role, we're going to pay you what you're worth. And he has some really blunt approaches to business, and obviously it's worked. Netflix is juggernaut and dominant in the streaming space, but I think it only works for the right people and the right culture, and you have to be very honest of what your culture is, because the Reed Hastings approach is not for everybody.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's a difference, I think, between candor and being attacking or defensive, or like there's a whole bunch of things that can come out of that. I jotted a note down to go check out that book. So
Yeah.
I love reading. Like it is one of my passions. I just really enjoy like sort of just learning through others' experience. I'd mentioned a couple books already. I'm actually currently, for founders, this is an interesting one. If you're struggling and it's taking a lot of time to get recognition for the work you're doing, as groundbreaking as it could be, I've been reading David McCulloch's biography or history of the Wright brothers. And so, and it's just fascinating that they had already flown at Kitty Hawk, and they couldn't get their local newspaper in Dayton to actually write a story on it because they didn't believe it. You had all the academics at the time saying, human powered flight is impossible. It's a pipe dream. And
really.
and they kept on at it over and over and over and made it happen. So anyways, those are I love like.
No, I love it. There's so much you can get from it. Like I'm always interested to hear from other families, like where they consume knowledge and learn. And I guess for you, like, is it books? Like, where do you absorb your information? Where do you continue to learn?
A lot of it is from books. Absolutely. I think that there is a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of books that are not really worth the time, or you get the gist of them after the first 3 chapters or what have you. I was
going to say about business books. It's sort of, you got to read a quarter of them and you get the concept.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's others like that are not business books, but they're impactful. Like I'm saying, this Wright brothers thing. It's like, I tell my team, like, what we're doing is hard. It's taking longer than we imagined, but look at the growth we have. Look at the outcomes. Look at these are all amazing things that we're celebrating along the way. But even the Wright brothers, who basically proved that man could fly, had, even after they flew, and I don't want to dig too deep into the story, like it took them years before they were able to get a contract with the government or a private company to actually build an airplane for them.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. And that's, I think it's a good reflection of like, hey, if you think what you're doing is hard, other people have had it harder. And if you stick to it, you'll be good. Like, that's what everyone says about founders. It's like, it's more about having the grit and determination to continue than anything. And a lot of people just quit when things get hard, and the ups and downs of business. But no, that's great to hear. Are there any, I love the book side of it. So from my side of it, I don't know if you see this as well. Like my consumption of knowledge and learning happens to go in like smaller forms now. Books take a long time and you have them. I love reading books and I should read more than I do, but I find my consumption is mostly through podcasts. I listen to a ton of business podcasts and I subscribe to some great email newsletters. I think at one point I was subscribing to way too many. I just narrowed them down to the ones that actually provide value. But yeah, that's where I think you can get a lot of inspiration. Like the typical ones is like Guy Raz, How I Built This is an amazing business podcast just to learn sort of tidbits here and there. I listen to a podcast called My First Million, which is business people brainstorming different business ideas and talking about different trends and stuff like that, which is great. So there's so much content out there. It's really about where you're going to go. But I actually find, I don't know if you find this as well, is I think the most important thing about content is trying to like absorb it and contextualize it into your own life. Like I try to take notes. I have like a huge file on my phone. Like it's great to read and have these stories, but like if you have something that you think is relevant, write it down and try to absorb it and use it in your day-to-day life. Like I don't see it as a leisure thing anymore. I actually want to like apply the readings, the listenings, the whatever, the YouTubing to my business. And it's helped a ton. So I think that mindset shift made a big difference for me.
Yeah, well, I used to read a lot of fantasy science fiction and stuff when I was younger and had more time. But now it's like, to your point, Dan, like if I'm going to spend the time reading, I'm going to be doing what I can to build my knowledge base or my experience so that it becomes meaningful. And that's not just about business too. There's so much in interpersonal relationships and things that are important to do. And the other thing you mentioned about podcasts, that's a relatively, I'm sort of late to the game, I guess, in that. I listened to the A16Z one, and there's another one I've listened to quite a few episodes, the DOAC, which is Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
And now I've participated in this one, and so I've listened to a couple of yours, and so I do think it is a format that is digestible and relatable, and also very targeted to the interests. And I think that's something really powerful about this type of media.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna tell you a quick story because it's something you should watch after, and something I think a lot of entrepreneurs should be. Because we were talking before about trade shows and presenting and stuff like that. It's a complete sidebar, but you mentioned the Diary of the CEO, which reminded me of the story. So the host of Diary of the CEO and the founder behind it is a guy named Stephen Bartlett. He's a young guy in the UK. And prior to starting this media company and running this podcast, he had a social media company where he managed a bunch of social media accounts and influencers and stuff like this. And he did it a long time ago, like 10 years ago or something. I'll have to look up the name of it. But they were essentially a social media management hub. They would create social media accounts. They would create these influencers, incubate them, grow them. And he was presenting, I'll find the YouTube video and send it to you. He was presenting at a soccer conference in the UK to all these executives, and he was talking about the future of social media or whatever it was. And he posted a picture on the screen of this young guy who just was signed by Barcelona. I forget what his name was. And it was very mysterious. And he showed all the social media posts the day before, people announcing it on their like Barcelona's Instagram page that this person got signed, or ESPN posted or whatever. And he told the story that this person was fake. And every executive in that room is in the soccer industry. And he said, this is the power of social media. I'm going to tell you the story. 48 hours ago, I told my social media team, all my influencers, to mock up a fake soccer player and say that he got signed by Barcelona. Blasted it out through all their social media channels, and through their distribution, through his business that he was presenting on. That story got picked up by ESPN, it got picked up by Fox News and whatever, and all these news publications were reporting on this fake character this guy made up 48 hours ahead of time to say that he got signed by this EuroLeague team or whatever it ended up being. And it was just such a perfection of a presentation, of an impact and an aha moment of all these old school executives not understanding the power of social media. And then they see this guy literally run circles around them of how to do PR. And I could only imagine how much business that drove, but it stuck with me of like, and going back to the idea of learning from others, like what an incredible storyteller of like, hey, I'm not going to tell you why my service is great, or I'm not going to like try to convince you social media is the future. Like, I'm going to go do it. It's literally going to touch you. And then your jaw is going to hit the floor. And it was such an amazing story. It was such a masterclass of like how to present and have impact in the world. And I do presentations from time to time. I've spoke at certain things, and it's really hard to create those moments. But if you become like a master, I think my big takeaway is like storytelling is everything in business, in sales, in recruiting. Like you really have to be able to be a good storyteller and get people motivated and excited about what you're doing. And if you can do that, you're really unstoppable. And this guy has become a powerhouse. He's like, was in his 20s when he started this influencer company. And now he's huge. This guy, Stephen Bartlett. So if anyone hasn't checked him out, he's incredible. He's super, super smart. He's an incredible storyteller. And I think that's one of the most important skills in business, period.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I've enjoyed those podcasts quite a bit. And the guests he brings on are very varied from their backgrounds, but that story you just told and how effective you could be in creating a presentation that is impactful, that's a lesson that I speak frequently at events and conferences and things, and when I'm one of the things that is the hardest to do in a conference when you're talking about technical outcomes or what have you is trying to make it relevant. Yeah. And so we started this conversation with me telling you about my sports injury. And so I think that I'm still a novice when it comes to storytelling compared to the examples that you've given. But it's really important for all the founders listening to this is how they tell the story about what their company's doing, the impact of their ideas, the traction they have, whatever it may be, is really important. There's another book I read. And I'm misquoting the title, but it's something like "Speak Like Churchill, Talk Like Lincoln" or something like that. And the statement
hopefully
about
it's not "Smoke Like Churchill" or that. I think it would be
or "Drink Like Churchill." That would be a bestseller.
Exactly.
But what I talked about is that Churchill, before he would speak to Parliament, would spend literally hours and hours writing and rewriting his speeches to the point where he would spend like an hour on a single sentence. And then he would practice how he would say it and the use of dramatic pauses, like everything in how he said it contributed to the story he was telling, which was far more important. It was the survival of the country in its deepest, darkest hours and so on and so forth that were so much more impactful than if he just said, we need to appropriate $72 billion for the Air Force for this purpose, right? And so much as, especially technical founders or as sales reps, we talk about our product and our tech and our, and not about the story of how what we do is changing your life or the world or whatever better. So that's a great point, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it gave me a chance to expand on it.
There's no way around it. The best salespeople and the best storyteller are politicians. How many people are telling their story and motivating millions and millions of people to vote for them? You have to be a good salesperson, and it's funny when you put that sort of lens on. And I think that the new way is like, to your point before about telling me the story about injuring your back. I've injured my back, and I know how painful it is and how frustrating it is and how it cripples your life. Like, that's an emotional connection. And if you just said like, hey, we're making electronic medical records easier to access or easier to transmit to other platforms, like, I don't know. Does that affect my life? I don't really know. And if you can make that emotional connection, it goes a super long way in sales and business and life. But it has to be genuine and make sure that connection happens. So that's great. I think you've inspired me to pick up more books and read a little bit quicker. But no, that's great. I think that gives some great insight into where you guys are going and the big mission that you're going on. And I guess from your side of it, is there anyone, if anyone wants to reach out to you or get involved, or I don't know if you guys are hiring, I can link to your guys' LinkedIn below, or people can reach out to you directly to connect. But what's the best way to get in touch with you if anyone wants to get involved with Shadowbox or connect with you personally?
Yeah, well, we're shadowbox.com, and I'm Greg at shadowbox.com if you want to send me an email, and I'm on LinkedIn. And please, if you do reach out to me with an invite, because I get many of them, put a note in there as to why you heard about, hey, I was watching this podcast at Founders University and something you said was interesting. Can I follow up? That is, I'm far more likely to be responsive to that than just a connection invite. Also, although I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn, I really try and connect with people that I've actually connected with, and
Yeah.
so that if somebody is asking me about them and do you know them, like I can be specific and actually helpful versus just having tens of thousands of people who are connected that are not meaningful in those relationships.
There you go. We might be able to make some warm introductions to people and build your network and others. But no, I really appreciate you jumping on, and great to chat. And hopefully we'll stay in touch and become friends and help each other out. And yeah, I appreciate all the insights.
Sounds great. Thanks again, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this, and it was really nice talking with you.
Yeah, you too. We'll speak soon, Greg. Have a good one.
Thanks.